I'm in charge of the legal hotline. How many of you have ever called the legal hotline? All right, that's good. I started there 25 years ago. We used to get about 80 calls a day. I think yesterday we had 390. So, I mean, it's not that there are that many more realtors than there used to be. It's just there's that much. Every deal is more complicated, right? There's just stuff you got to know. It's just, I mean, how many of you remember the 6-page purchase contract? How many remember the 4-page? How many are older than me and remember the 2-page? How many are really old and remember the 1-page? Okay. Everything changes, right? I mean, it never gets smaller, it gets bigger. And all these other forms, they just keep adding forms, never take away any forms. There's always new laws, they never take away any of the old laws. You just have to remember everything you already knew and then learn something new, right? I mean, it's hard. One of my attorneys, his full-time job is to keep the rest of us updated. Because every day there's new laws, every day there's new forms, every day there's new, from some government agency somewhere there's a case or something. So I just want to sort of give you the update of some of the latest stuff. I guess I'm being filmed here, so you're going to be able to look at this. All you've got to do is Google me, Gov Hutchinson, go into YouTube, and there are people who have already illegally taped me doing this, so if you want to see that. Plus, you can go to the CAR website, car.org, if you want it in writing. car.org, go to the legal section on the first page, risk management summary. I do one every 3 or 4 months. You can just download and read it, okay? All right, so what's the latest? Before I even talk about new laws, I want you to be aware of a new library on zip forms called CAR Sample Letters. For years, when people call the hotline, you have a problem with the other agent, they're not presenting your offer, a problem with the seller, they won't return the deposit, problem with the tenant, they won't let you show the property, these things like this, and you call up the hotline, you're all upset. Say, what's going on? We explain the story. We say, you know what? You're right, and they're wrong. You are the good guy, they're the bad guy. And then the realtor caller says, what do I do? I say, maybe you should write them a letter demanding that they do what they're supposed to do. And then they say, can you write that letter? And we say, no. But now, on the website, not on the website, on zip forms, all of you that have zip, you all have zip forms, there's a new library called CAR Sample Letters where you can actually, obviously you probably talk to your manager before you do this, but basically we have nice letters there. You don't have to hire a lawyer to write it. They're written in nice, the way you're supposed to write them to tell someone you need to present my offer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It cites the right law and the form and everything like that. So check it out, and you don't have, they're not copyrighted. You can put your any heading you want on it. It's fine. Your letterhead, but it's okay to do. All right? The last-minute crowd is coming in.
There's more seats up here in the middle, and there's along the side now.
All right. Anyway, so that's everyone understand these letters. Some of these letters are actually things that they legally have to do. Have you ever had a deal where the seller, you close escrow and the seller leaves some of their crap behind? Yeah. It's never happened. All right. Now, when they leave crap behind, that could be two possible things, right? Trash or personal property. If they leave trash behind, you just throw it away. It's trash. But sometimes they leave actual personal property, like a nice chair, perfectly functional. It's not garbage, it's a chair. Or cabinets, or a table, or a podium. They leave stuff behind that's obviously not garbage. Well, just because they left it behind doesn't mean they gave it to you. You know what you got to do? You got to write them a letter before you dispose of it. Dear jerk seller, you left your stuff behind. You've got 18 days to come and get it. This is a letter you have to write a certain way, and that's one of the letters we have on the website now. The letter you write, either the tenant or the seller who leaves behind abandoned personal property. It's got to be written a certain way. By the way, what happens after 18 days and they don't show up? Is it yours now? No. Now you have to ask yourself, what's the resale value of what they left? In other words, what could you get for it on eBay, right? What's not what it was when they bought it, but what could you get for it now? And you add it all up, everything they left, and if it reaches a certain magic number, if it's below the certain magic number, you can throw it away, keep it, do whatever you want. But if it's above the certain number, you know what you got to do? You got to continue to store it forever or sell it at a garage sale. Does anyone know the magic number?
600, isn't it?
It is now $700.
Oh, wow.
$700. So I'm sure a lot of you are going to say this is worth about $699. And I'm just going to keep it, right? By the way, what if you have a garage sale? You sell it at a garage sale. Do you keep the money? No. You pay yourself a storage fee. You pay yourself a sales fee. And if there's any left, you give it to the county.
What a nightmare.
I know. I'm sure no one's ever done that in history, right? I'm sure when you do it at the garage sale, magically the sales fee is magically equal to the amount you collect at the garage sale, right? Okay. So you understand the concept. We have letters that you can use. Some of them are legally required. One more. You ever hear of a situation where the tenant just leaves in the middle of the night? They just abandon the property. They're gone. They never gave notice, right? You never gave them notice. They just disappeared. Well, can you consider that property abandoned and re-rent it? No. First, you got to write them a letter. Where do you send it? Because you don't know where they are. You send it to that address. If they didn't forward it, it's their problem. But the letter has to say, it looks like you abandoned the property. If we don't hear from you in 18 days, we're going to consider it abandoned and re-rent it. This magic 18 days again. Okay? But that's another letter that's on the zip forms, okay? That's worded exactly. All right. Now let me talk about some new laws, okay? Let me start with the issue of taxes. Taxes are never good news, but the good news is this year they didn't mess with them. We were very concerned that they were going to reduce the ability to deduct interest on mortgages. We're also worried that they were going to take away the fact that you don't have to pay capital gains when you sell a house at a profit. Is anyone selling a house at a profit yet? Or is everyone underwater? But theoretically, one day, right, you'll actually sell a house for more than you paid for it. So you have a profit. That's a capital gain. You got to pay taxes on that? Not if it's your primary residence. Those of you that raised your hands that remembered the 4-page contract, you remember when the law said you actually had to pay tax on that or roll it over into the next house.
Yeah.
The best law that ever got passed for real estate in my career was the law that says you can sell your house at a profit and not pay taxes. Up to $500,000. But anyone who sells their house for $500,000 more than they paid for it, do you feel sorry for them? No. Pay some taxes. Pay some taxes, right? So they didn't mess with that either. And here's the really good news. You're still doing short sales. For at least one more year, you can do a short sale tax-free. Meaning, the house is worth $200, but you owe the bank $250. You do a short sale at $200. What happens to that extra $50? Can the bank still sue the seller for the $50? Not anymore. But since they can't sue you, the IRS says, well, they just gave you $50,000. Report that as income on your income tax. Fortunately, there's a law that just got extended for one more year that says if it's your primary residence, you don't have to pay that income. You don't have to recognize that income. That's a federal law. What about state law? The bill to say that's California law is still in the assembly. It hasn't got passed yet. We think it's going to get passed and be retroactive to January 1st. Nothing's guaranteed till it happens, right? But at least you can clearly tell your clients today, no federal tax if you do a short sale. What I'm telling you this is if you have any clients out there who are potential sellers, it's going to be a short sale. They're just not sure when they're going to sell. Tell them they got to sell this year. Because if they wait till next year, they may have to pay federal income tax, right? And it's got to be your primary residence. So what if you have an income property and you want to do a short sale and you don't want to pay taxes? You know what you do? You move in with your tenants. Just long enough to sell it. You don't have to be there 2 of the last 5 years. You just got to be living there when it sells.
Wow.
The 2 of the last 5 years is to get that no capital gains when you sell it at a profit. But the rule about avoiding income tax on debt forgiveness on a short sale, it's not it was your primary residence 2 of the last 5 years. It was your primary residence when it sold. So move in with those tenants. All right? All right, that's the only tax stuff. The only other tax is certain people's tax rates did go up January 1st if you make over $450,000. Do you really care about those people? I don't care about them. I'm just kidding. Their capital gains went from 15 to 20. So if you sell a capital asset, not your primary residence, you sell an income property, you sell a piece of land, We all have to pay 15%. Those people have to pay 20%. So there is some tax increase, okay? All right, enough on tax. Next topic, related topic, good news. The area of foreclosures. Let's say, remember my scenario, you did a short sale, the house was worth house worth 200, you owe the bank 250. What if it's a foreclosure? Same thing. You owe the bank 250, it's only worth 200. You stop making payments, they foreclose on you. Do they just get the house or can they sue you for the extra 50? It depends. If they do a normal foreclosure, which is an auction, they can't touch you. But if they do what they call a judicial foreclosure, which is foreclosing through the court system, they can sue you for the entire amount they owe. As long as the loan's not a purchase money loan. So if it's a purchase money loan, the lender can never get a deficiency whether they do a normal foreclosure or a judicial foreclosure. The problem is, many of us, me included, have refinanced our purchase money loans. They're no longer purchase money, potentially vulnerable to a deficiency on a judicial foreclosure. Here's the good news. There's a new law that says if it was originally purchase money, you refinance, it's still purchase money for purposes of this law. The only bad thing is it's not retroactive. It only goes back to January 1st of this year. You know what that means? I have to refinance one more time. And so does everyone else you know who has previously refied a purchase money loan and they want to be sure that they can never be sued by the lender. Lenders like this law, don't they? Lenders now have a marketing position to tell everybody to refinance. Okay? All right. Next topic. Department of Real Estate. Did you know as of July 1st, there will be no more Department of Real Estate? You can do whatever you want. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'll bet.
They changed the name, okay? It's going to be the Bureau of Real Estate.
Oh, wow.
Why do you care? You know why you care? Because you all have business cards that probably say DRE license number. Start phasing them out. Now, are you going to get in trouble if next year you're handing out cards that still say DRE? No, you're not going to get in trouble. But you're just not going to look super professional when everyone else out there has BRE and you have DRE. So I'm encouraging you to start. You can start now if you want. You're not going to get in trouble for doing it early, okay? July 1st, Bureau of Real Estate. There's one more thing from the new BRE that you should know about, which is good news. I think it's good news. See if you agree with me. They tightened it up a little about how to get a broker's license. Here's what I mean. How do you get a broker's license? You've got to do 4 things. Pay a fee, pass a test, take 8 college-level courses and pass those. And what's number 4? Either 2 years experience as a salesperson or a 4-year college degree. They tightened up the 4-year college degree. You ready for this? You actually have to major or minor in real estate. What a concept, right? Can you believe it wasn't that before? Right. Okay. So. All right. That's the latest. So I've covered taxes, foreclosure, short sales, and DRE. Next topic, rentals. There's some laws you should be aware about if you ever deal with rentals. Let me ask you a question. How much notice do you have to give a tenant to evict them in California? You all said the correct answer is depends. The normal rule is 60 days. But there are 4 exceptions. 2 30-day, 2 90-day. 30-day exception number 1. The tenant's been there less than a year, month to month. If they're on a lease, you got to wait till the end of the lease. By the way, how much notice do you have to give a tenant at the end of a lease? 0.
Oh.
You call them up the day before. You know your lease is over tomorrow.
Goodbye.
Tenant says, oh yeah, what does that mean? That means you got to leave tomorrow. One of our sample letters is the letter to write a tenant towards the end of the lease. Which you don't have to do it, but you know if you don't tell them, they're going to forget and blah, blah, blah. Okay? By the way, at the end of when you got a tenant month to month, and they're paying their rent, they're a good tenant, can you just evict them anyway? Do you need a reason to evict someone? No. You just say, tenant, 60 days you got to leave. Tenant says, why are you evicting me? I pay my rent. You say, because I'm bored with you. I need a more interesting tenant. Perfectly legal. Okay? All right. Unless you're in rent control. That's what rent control means. The whole point of rent control is you cannot evict someone unless you have a reason. Anyway, all right. The other 30-day notice exception, very important for realtors, is you're selling a rental property. Tenant's been there more than a year. But if let me rephrase. If you're selling a rental property, that tenant only gets 30 days, even though they normally get 60. But the buyer has to write on the purchase contract, buyers will occupy for at least 1 year. Normally your buyers don't have to say anything like that on their offers. But if you want to get the tenant out in 30 days on the property that you're buying, write that in the offer, buyers will occupy for at least 30 days. That gives the seller, who's the landlord, the ability to give them a 30-day notice rather than 60. So that's the two 30-day. You know what the two 90-day exceptions are? Number one, Section 8 tenant. Number two, this is important. This is the law that was scheduled to expire last year and it got extended for 7 more years. If the tenant on the property was there when it was foreclosed on, that tenant gets a 90-day notice. No matter how long they've lived there, no matter if they just moved in 2 weeks ago, as long as they pay rent, you got to give them 90 days. What if they're on a lease? Same thing, 90 days. See, if you buy a normal house on a lease, you're buying it subject to the lease. If you foreclose on a property where the tenant's on a lease, 90 days. So all tenants on foreclosure property get 90 days, which is why the REO agents usually do cash for keys, right? To bribe them to leave early. Any tenant will leave early if you give them enough money, right? Call the tenant, you need to leave. Oh, I can't leave. It's impossible. I can't leave. Here's a check. I'll be gone tomorrow. This will happen, okay? All right, so the 90-day notice is extended. What if it's a Section 8 tenant on foreclosure property? 180 days. What if it's a Section 8 tenant on a foreclosure property in rent control? Kill yourself first. You're never going to get the tenant will never leave. You have no rent control anywhere near here, right?
No.
Nearest is probably LA. All right. What else? Here's another law that was scheduled to expire that got extended. If any of you or your clients acquire property through foreclosure, you have to maintain the exterior in good condition, or else you can get fined $1,000 per day. Now, the rest of us, any of us that own a house, right? If we don't cut the grass or you don't clean it up, the neighbors could actually get together and sue you. Say, this is a public nuisance. Your house is a mess. It's hurting the property values of the whole street. But what I'm saying is, if you acquired the property through foreclosure, not only can the neighbors get together and sue you, but the city can fine you $1,000 a day.
They go for banks too?
Yeah, and the banks don't do this. So here's what the banks do. They try to get sneaky. When they list the property, they write in the listing contract, listing agent assumes the liability for maintaining the property. They're trying to make you liable for the $1,000 a day penalty. So just word to the wise. All right? One more related law. Let's say you're a landlord and you have fourplex, let's say, and all of a sudden you, the landlord, get a notice of default. So you're in foreclosure. Do you have to tell all your tenants you just got this notice? No. But let's say you have a vacancy and you want to re-rent it. So you advertise, get a new tenant in the property, even though you're currently in foreclosure. There's a new law that says you must tell the new tenant that they're before they sign the lease, that they're renting a property that's in foreclosure, and you have to give them a special form to do this. And it's a new form on Zip Forms called LID, Landlord in Default. And you ready for this? It's in 6 languages: English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Tagalog, which is Filipino. So if the tenant's first language is one of those other 5, you got to give them the form in that language. What if the tenant's first language is Japanese or Thai or Portuguese? You give it to them in English and hope they can figure it out.
Why don't they do that with all?
That's the only law that requires you to give the form in 6 different languages. Okay, so landlord in default. Carbon monoxide detectors are now required in all residential property, not just single family. But there is an exception if the property is totally electric, no attached garage, no fireplace. Then you're exempt. Everyone else, carbon monoxide detectors, right? Now, you know what's interesting about carbon monoxide detectors as opposed to smoke detectors? Smoke detectors are a point of sale requirement. So if I sell you my house and there's no functioning smoke detector in there, you can sue me after close. Say, hey, you sold me a house without a smoke detector. But if I sell you a house without a carbon monoxide detector, you can't do anything to me. But while I own the house, if I don't have a carbon monoxide detector, the police could fine me $200. Whereas they're not going to fine me if I don't have a smoke detector. So a smoke detector, you have to do it when you sell it. Carbon monoxide detector, you got to do it all the time. But if you don't do it, as soon as you sell it to the buyer, it's their problem. So if you have any neighbors you don't like, and you know they don't have carbon monoxide detectors, anonymous call to the police. $200 is waiting for you over this. Just kidding. I'm on film here. Just kidding. Didn't joke. Smoking. Can a landlord prohibit smoking? Can a landlord prohibit smoking not just inside but outside? Yes. Catch is it's got to be in the rental agreement. You cannot have it on the attached rules and regulations. It's got to be in the lease itself. What if the tenant says, well, I know your rule is no smoking, but I have a disability, and I need to smoke medical marijuana.
Oh, brother.
I got a prescription from my doctor right here. Do you have to allow it? No. Because it still violates federal law. What if they say, well, I'll just eat brownies then? You can say no illegal substances in this property. You know, when we go to Humboldt County, this is a big deal. This is a really big deal. All right. Can a landlord prohibit pets? You're right. Can a landlord say, normally I prohibit pets, but I'll allow a pet, but you got to pay me extra rent and a pet deposit? Yes. But here's the thing. If it's a service animal, you have to allow it, and you can't charge pet deposit or higher rent. So very important to understand that. And you can't get around that. There's no excuse. And you know what service animals, it doesn't just mean like a seeing eye dog or a hearing dog. It means the doctor has prescribed that this tenant needs this dog for their mental health. A mental health pet. You have to allow those too.
So you need to find
Find a different reason to evict them, right? All right, enough on rentals. Let's talk about forms. Okay. So I already mentioned one new form, landlord in default. Two more new forms, not a big deal. Do you ever have FHA buyers? Okay. Do you have anything but FHA buyers? Okay. FHA buyers, you know the law says that if you're an FHA buyer and the property doesn't appraise, you don't have to buy it. But then you have the CR purchase contract that says same thing, but then in the CR purchase contract, a lot of times you remove that contingency. Let me ask you, in your market now, are buyers being forced to remove their loan and appraisal in 17 days? Right? Because sellers have so much power, right? They can say, if you don't remove it, I'll sell to somebody else. So now we have buyers on day 17 removing their loan and appraisal contingency. So what if an FHA buyer removes their contingency in the contract, but the law still says they're protected? Are they protected or aren't they? They're protected.
They're protected for the appraisal.
For the appraisal. And here's what this new form is. It's just called the FVAC. FHA VA Amendatory Clause. Because VA is works the same way. You just give it to your FHA buyer, and you're basically making them feel good. You're saying, don't worry. Since you're an FHA buyer, even if you remove your appraisal contingency, contractually, the law still protects you. If it ultimately doesn't appraise, you're good. Okay? You probably give it to the seller, too, so the seller knows, I'm not going to get this person's deposit if it doesn't appraise. Right? So that's a new form. Here's the last new form. PSD. Parking and Storage Disclosure. Do you guys ever sell condos? Okay, you sell a condo. Buyer, imagine this happening to you. You sell the condo, buyer buys it, closes escrow, it's a complex. Buyer moves in on the moving day, guess what? Their vehicle doesn't fit in the parking space assigned to their unit. They got a big SUV, it's a small space. So what would you do if you were a buyer? Sue the realtor, of course. That's what they do. And there were about a few of these lawsuits, and the realtors lost. So we have a form for you. It's called Parking and Storage Disclosure, PSD. The idea, you give it to the buyer and say, okay, buyer of condo, it is your job to figure out if the parking and storage facilities at this complex are adequate for yourself. Figure this out before you buy the house, the condo. In other words, don't blame the realtor if it doesn't fit. You are advised to check it out for yourself. This happens all the time. There's a bad case against a realtor, so we give you a new form. Why do you think you have so many forms? All the bad cases, new forms. Have you ever seen the form called the Statewide Buyer and Seller Advisory? That's 11 pages of lawsuits that realtors lost that have been turned into paragraphs in the contract. Everyone's favorite is golf course addendum. Like it tells you that if you live near a golf course, bad things can happen. A golf ball could come and shatter your windshield. It could hit you in the head. Do you know before we had that, though, people would buy houses near a golf course. Golf ball would come and hit them in the head. They'd sue the realtor. Realtor never explained that could happen. You moron, you're on a golf course. How would you not figure that out for yourself? I got to be careful. I'm on video here. Okay, yes.
I have a question. On all these disclosures, there is no question about smoking in a property. We're being sued right now because the buyer claims...
Condo or just a regular house?
Oh, home.
Okay.
The buyer claims it was never disclosed that they smoked in the home.
And now they moved in. All they can smell is
She
the
can't
tobacco
breathe,
and everything.
right, and she's going to die. And why is that not a question on the SPQ?
I think they're working on it.
Are they?
Dennis
She's on Forms Committee, yeah. This is exactly right. That's going to be the new question on the SPQ. See, I don't think they're going to win that case. I mean, they were obviously looked at the house, but when they were looking at it, even while she was looking at it, she bought it anyway. Well, if you have the record of her saying that, you're good. Okay. All right. So 3 new forms. LID, landlord in default. PSD, parking storage disclosure. FVAC, FHAV amendment. All right. Do we have any of the forms that you already use? And I'm not going to talk about the April forms yet because it's still in play. What I just talked about, what happened in November. Are there any forms that changed in November that you need to know about? I think there's one interesting thing you should know about, which is on the listing form. I hope you noticed this, and I forget what paragraph, I think it's the last paragraph. There's a checkbox where the seller can say they don't want you to take pictures of the house and post them on the internet. In other words, if they don't check that box, it's okay to do that. But if they check the box, say, no, don't take videos of my house and post them on the internet, I don't want that to happen. They have the right to say to you, don't do it. So just be careful when they're filling out the form whether or not they check that box. Okay? Now let's talk about the forms that are coming out next month. Okay? Like I said, I don't want to talk about any of the new ones, but let me just tell you about a couple of big changes you should know about. First of all, not a big deal. On the purchase contract, the RPA, there's going to be one new sentence that says to the buyer is aware that there's a website that they can access to find out the general location of underground gas lines. Because people want to know if they're living on top of a gas line. Because one blew up a couple of years ago. And the people got killed. So that's a very serious thing. So the good news is it's not the realtor or the seller's job to know where the gas lines are. It is simply your job to tell the buyer where they can check it out for themselves. And you don't actually have to say anything. It's going to be right on the contract. So by reading the contract, you've done your job. What is this exactly like? Megan's Law, right? You don't have to know where the sex offenders are. All you got to do is tell the buyer where they can check, and that's right on the contract. And I always tell you, don't check that. You don't want to know where the sex offenders are. Because if you know where they are, then you have to disclose it, right? Better not to know, right? It's probably going to be the same thing for these underground gas lines. You don't really want to know where they are. Unless there's one right under your own house, right? Then you probably know. You know the famous Megan's Law case in San Diego was the realtor checked the website and found to his surprise that his client, the seller, was on the list. The seller seller was the sex offender. So now they have a legal decision to make. Do I have to tell the buyer that the seller was a registered sex offender? And they said to themselves, why should we? The guy's leaving. So they didn't disclose it. Buyer buys it, buyer moves in. You know what happens. The neighbors come over. Oh, we're so glad you bought the sex offender house. The buyer is now freaked out. Buyer sues, but the buyer lost. Court said, the guy left. The guy left. What's the problem? The neighborhood's improved. No problem. The seller says, I don't feel like living in a house that used to be occupied by, too bad, basically. The court said too bad, basically. So, if you think about it, what the only thing you really need to disclose that happened in a house before is that someone died there. And that's only 3 years. There are two other things that we strongly encourage you to disclose, though. One of them is you actually have to, and that's if the house was ever used as a meth lab. And here's the latest one. We get asked this question. What if the tenants or the sellers of the house were growing marijuana? Maybe legally, maybe not. We think you should definitely disclose that. Because I don't want you to be the test case where the court says, oh yes, that's a material fact that the seller was growing. If you know it, disclose it. That's our advice. All right? Okay. Here's an interesting thing that's coming on the listing form. Let's say you have a listing for $200,000, and you get a full price offer, $200,000. Does the seller have to accept that offer? No. So what's the significance of getting a full price offer? You've earned a commission, right? You can say to the seller, you don't have to accept it, but if you don't accept it, I think I may just sue you for 6% or whatever. Have any of you ever sued a seller for not accepting a full price offer? See, no one ever does. You did. Did you win?
Yeah.
Good. You'll never win again. The reason is, true story, there was a recent case where somebody had a $17 million listing. It was 85 acres of land. Got a $17 million cash offer. Listing agent's happy. Selling agent's happy. Present the offer. Seller counters it at $21 million.
Oh, jeez.
Buyer goes away. Buyer's agents got mad. Listing agent was mad too. The buyer's agent's really mad. Hey, I got a full price offer here. I want a commission. So they sued. And the court said, no, you can't. You don't earn. We're not going to award you the 6%. Why not? Because they didn't sell the house. Yes, but the listing contract says you've earned a commission if you produce an offer that's either acceptable to the seller or meets the terms of the listing. And this offer clearly met the terms of the listing. The judge didn't deny that the offer met the terms of the listing, just basically said, nah, you don't get paid unless they actually sell it. So the judge didn't basically care what the contract actually said. He just didn't think it was fair, basically. Then went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal said the same thing. Then they went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court wouldn't take the case. So that's the new law in California now. You've only earned a commission if the seller accepts the offer. So our listing form is now going to say that. Because we can't have our listing form be contrary to what the law says. So the listing form is going to say, you want to earn a commission, you got to sell the house. Most of you normally think that way anyway. You figure, whatever. At least, but he and a couple other people have actually in the past actually sued and won. It's just not going to happen anymore. Bad news, especially if you got a $17 million listing, right? Then you'd be really thinking about that lawsuit. What is 6% of $17 million? Anybody know? It's $1 million.
Yeah, retirement.
Retirement is correct. You can live a little while on that. All right. Next topic. Let me talk about the whole area of fees. I got good news on some areas. One of them is, and I guess I'm talking to Coldwell Banker Management now when I say this, the United States Supreme Court once and for all said it's perfectly legal for realtors to charge clients fees. Transaction coordinator fee, escrow coordinator fee, short sale negotiator fee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to justify the fee and prove to the court that you actually provided a separate service of a value exactly equal to the fee. The U.S. Supreme Court said basically the law doesn't say that. The law doesn't in any way regulate realtors charging fees. So that's good news for management. You can charge whatever fee you want. Obviously, don't do something crazy like charge someone a short sale negotiator fee when it's not a short sale. Don't do that. Or a transaction coordinator fee when you don't actually have a transaction coordinator. I mean, that's when you'll get in trouble, right? And the other thing is, you can charge your own fee, but let's say you're the realtor and you're hiring someone else, like to provide a credit report, or maybe you're hiring a short sale negotiator that's not in-house. They're separate. So you hire them on behalf of your client, and they charge you $300. And you, of course, want to pass that fee on to your client. Perfectly okay, but you can't upcharge. If they charge you $300, you charge them $300. If it's your own company's person, you can charge whatever you want. But you understand, you can't upcharge on third-party fees. All right? All right. What about fees? Now, next up, yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So let me just make
Okay.
sure. This is a big thing we've all talked about.
Good.
Huge.
Okay.
So I represent a buyer.
Right.
And I sell them a house, and I let them know at that time when they sign a contract or addendum with me that they're also going to be paying a $250 transaction fee to our house CC.
Right.
For that service.
Right.
Or I represent a listing agent, and I let them know I'm a listing agent. I let them know I'm going to charge $150 that's going to go towards my transaction.
Charging the buyer or the seller?
Seller. So,
Okay,
so
right.
either or. Are
Right.
they both acceptable?
Yes, absolutely. Totally okay. Totally okay. Here's a related question. Pardon? Yeah. Here's a related issue. You're the listing agent. It's a short sale. You got a short sale negotiator fee. Can the listing agent charge the buyer to pay the seller's short sale negotiator fee? You can, but you got to be careful. Number one, if you're the listing office and you're asking the buyer to pay a fee that your seller has incurred, or that you've incurred, basically you're making the buyer your client, right? You've just created a dual agency. If they're making you pay them, it's pretty hard to say that they're not your client. And the other thing is, if you're trying to get the buyer to pay a fee directly to the listing office, you need to have a separate contract between the listing office and the buyer. Not on the purchase, not just putting it on the purchase contract, separate agreement. If you do that, it's okay. What if it says in the MLS, selling agent has to pay a fee? That's not legal. Listing agent, you cannot make the selling office pay any of your fees. You can make the buyer pay, but not the buyer's agent.
I mean, what they're doing now is they're offering less commission to the selling agent, and the listing agent's taking more on short sale.
Yeah.
We're just offsetting it 2.5%.
They're offsetting
Right.
the fee by, instead of making you pay it directly, they're just offering you
They're
less.
just offering you less commission. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the same thing. But
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's legal.
Yeah.
That's they can do it that way. Yeah. You can negotiate that, obviously, but you have no power in this market as a buyer's agent to negotiate your commission. This is not a, this is an unusual market, right? This is a low inventory, like we've never seen market. All right. Yes.
Have people call the hotline and get different answers.
On which question?
The one you just said.
Which one about the agent?
The transaction fees representing the listing and the buying side agent, there's been so much ambiguity even coming out of your hotline.
The Department of Real Estate, you can check, they did a bulletin where they basically explained the pitfalls of doing it, but they didn't flat out say you can't do it. And I'm saying to be careful, the way you protect yourself is treat them as a client and do a separate contract with them. If you don't do it that way, then you have potential issues. But if you clearly have a separate, like a commission agreement with the listing agent to buyer, you're paying us, even though we're not your agent, work with you, we're somebody else, and now that means we're your agent now, and that also means here's the contract that says what you're paying for. If you spell it all out, what they're paying for, I don't believe that that's a problem. Okay? All right. What about other types? Now let's talk about referral fees. Here's the latest thing we've seen. We've seen realtors advertising, if you refer me somebody and it closes escrow, I'll make a contribution to the charity of your choice. That is not legal. You cannot offer an inducement to someone to refer you a client in connection with selling residential 1 to 4. Now, if it was something other than that, if you're selling land, if you're selling 5 units, if you're selling a business, if you're looking for a tenant as opposed to a buyer, You can put ads out in the paper. I pay referral fees. I pay referral fees. But you can't offer inducements, referral fees, or anything for someone to refer you business unless they have got a real estate license, which is different than offering money to someone to actually be your client. Like it would be okay to put list with me at close of escrow, I'll kick back some money to you. You're all thinking kickback sounds bad. Kickbacks can be good. It's perfectly okay to kick back money to your own client, whether you're the buyer's agent or the seller's agent. And you can offer that up front. Buy with me, you'll get a TV set at close of escrow. Whatever you want to do. Because that's not a referral fee. You're just offering to share, give back some of your commission. Perfectly legal. You understand the difference, right? Okay. The other thing that can't pay referral fees, of course, are between affiliates. Title escrow, home inspector, termite, lenders, realtors. You can't pay incentives to each other.
But we were told by the board attorney now, if someone calls me and says I've got a referral of just a friend, and we are allowed to pay them a referral fee as long as they don't partake in the transaction.
That's a very good question. In other words, a former client of yours calls you up because they like you. They're not looking for money. They just think you're a good realtor. And you want to thank them. Perfectly legal.
No, if they call me and say, my friend wants to buy a house, I've suggested they come to you.
Right.
And then at the close of selling the friend the house, you give them a $300 gift card.
That's a thank you. Depends on how they ask the question. If the former client calls you up and says, I got a friend, I'm going to refer them to you if you pay me.
Right. No.
Then you can't pay them.
Right.
So you can only pay the ones who don't want the money. Seriously. Seriously. And title escrow and stuff, I mean, I remember the good old days. The good old days, I'd be going to a meeting like this, and some title company would have a lot of food for everybody. Hot food. Steaks. They'd have great food. But they've really cracked down on affiliates giving you stuff. So, what if a title company gives you an illegal donut? Eat it quickly is correct. Because it's illegal for you to take it, just like it's illegal for them to give it. But if you eat it fast, who knows? I can't believe I'm saying all this on tape. This is not going on YouTube. This is going to stay within this company, right? All right. I should say a general disclaimer on tape. A lot of what I say is meant for humorous purposes only. All right. Do any of you guys sell commercial? At least one of you. So you should know a couple new laws you should know about. One of them is, and this applies even to Coldwell Banker, but anyone who has a business, you have a commercial property, there's a law called the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. What does that law say? It says in certain circumstances, you have to make your property accessible to disabled persons. You notice what I said, in certain circumstances? It doesn't cover everybody. I mean, let's say you got a small, we're on the second floor here, aren't we? I don't think there's an elevator, is there?
Yeah, there is.
All right, let's say there wasn't. Not all two-story office complexes have elevators. Have you noticed that? Does that mean they're violating the law? No. Some attorney has advised them that based on the size of the units, it would be so cost prohibitive to put in an elevator, you don't have to do it. I mean, in other words, it's not automatic. Anyway, the point is, you have a particular rental property. You should have, at some point or another, hired a lawyer or somebody to figure out whether you are or are not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay. There are actually people that are experts at doing this. You ready? What they're called? Certified Access Specialists. Ooh. Here's the new law. The new law says starting July 1st, if you're going to rent out a commercial property, you must tell the new tenant whether or not you've had a certified access specialist ever check out the property. You notice I didn't say you actually had to get a certified access specialist to check out the property. You just have to tell the new tenant whether or not you have. Of course, if you say you haven't, the tenant may say, well, I want you to do that before I buy it, before I rent it. Who knows? But you understand that? July 1st, you must do that. The second thing you have to do July 1st is if you're selling a big old commercial property more than 50,000 square feet or renting the entire property, you must disclose to the new buyer or the new tenant how much power, electricity have you been using. Okay, that's easy enough. Call your utility company. And how does that compare with the normal usage of a building like this? Are you using more or less than a normal 50,000 square foot warehouse? I know what you're thinking. How the heck would I know? There's a website. It's the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency website. If you look up Energy Star system, and you can figure it out. It takes a while, but you can do it. Okay? Starting next January 1st, it applies to commercial properties of 10,000 square feet and up. Starting July of next year, 5,000 square feet. You can't be answering your phone.
She answered for Margaret,
Who's Margaret?
our broker.
In that case, I guess it's okay. I guess that's okay. All right. You would all agree. Do you guys have your own escrow company? Is it a DOC escrow or DRE escrow? Okay, then forget that I was going to tell you something about DRE escrows. You don't need to know. All right.
Yeah, we do, because
Sometimes we have to use the.
But it only matters if it's yours.
Oh.
So you don't care. I'm not going to tell you. So we're in a low inventory market, right?
Yes.
Are you getting multiple offers?
Oh, God, yes.
What's the most offers you got on a listing? How many?
15.
15. That's a lot. 65?
72.
Wow. If you're a listing agent and you get 50 offers, are you required to present all 50 to the seller?
Yes.
Normally, yes. But the seller has the right to say to the agent, that's way too many. You pick the best ones. Or tell everyone to resubmit their highest and best offer, or something like that. In other words, sellers can countermand the rules if it's what the seller wants. The problem, of course, is some agents, I'm sure none around here, of course, some agents, when they do that, they will just pick out the ones that happen to be their own buyers. That's the ones we're going to present to the seller, which is clear fraud, right? And when you see this happening, you need to file a complaint, because this is happening. Listings are so valuable now that agents are so tempted to just, I know I can get my own buyer in this, so I'll sort of favor my own buyer. This is criminal activity, basically. What they're doing to the seller is, serious fraud. But you got to report it. If you don't report it, you're not going to get anywhere. Did you know not only do listing agents have the duty to present your offer, but you have the right to participate in the presentation unless the seller in writing says, signed by seller, that no, I don't want the selling agent to be there. Why would they not want you to be there? One of our sample letters is the letter to the listing agent asking politely, when do I get to present my offer to your seller? Citing the rule that says you have the right to do that.
How about if we start using exclusive agency agreements?
As the listing agent?
Right.
I don't know. That doesn't change any of these rules. Yeah, it doesn't change the rule that all offers have to be presented. Well, you understand the difference. Exclusive right to sell means you get paid no matter who sells it. Exclusive agency, you're saying you get paid if an agent finds it. So if the seller can find the buyer on their own without you, they don't have to pay you. But
you're saying the seller's giving you the right only to find the buyer.
So the seller's, the listing agent is saying to the seller, I'm only going to pay you if you find the buyer.
Right.
Now I'd wonder myself, why would a seller want to do that? Why is that in the seller's interest? For you not to expose the property to as wide an audience as possible. I mean, some sellers, you're right, there are reasons for this. Some sellers don't want everyone to know they're selling. They don't care about how much money they're going to make, although I don't see why most sellers would not want to get as much money as humanly possible. But some sellers may say, I don't want the hassle of 50 people walking through my house. I guess it's possible for a rational seller to not want the property exposed as much as possible. But I think if you're taking a chance legally that some seller's going to figure out one day because their friend told them, you didn't expose that property, you probably could have got more money if you'd exposed it as much as you possibly could have, MLS and all that stuff. I mean, that's economics 101. The more people are aware of your product, the better chance you are of getting more money for it. Anyway, just a thought. But here's what I want to talk about. You get multiple offers. So one issue is the duty to present offers, the duty to participate, and the seller can control the process. Seller says, this is all I want. You screen them. I don't care. Seller's in control. That's true. But then the next issue is, what happens if you get 3 offers? And you want to counter all 3 of them? Okay. Send out 3 counteroffers. Please check paragraph 4 of those counteroffers. If you send out a counteroffer without checking the multiple counteroffer box, here's what you're saying. It's a race. First one back wins. And there's going to be a big argument about whose email got to you first, right? So if you're going to counter more than one, check paragraph 4 on the counteroffer from multiple counteroffer. Then you're telling each one, it doesn't matter who comes back first. Seller still has to re-sign the one they want and send it back to you. So I mentioned this a couple months ago to some office, and some broker comes up to me after and says, well, why shouldn't I just check multiple counteroffer on every single one, even if it's only one? I said, because that's fraud. You can only check the multiple counteroffer box if you are truly sending out more than one at the same time. Well, what about if I get one offer today, counter it today, it's out there, then tomorrow I get another offer, I want to counter that one too. Can I call up the first person and say, you know that counter I sent you, it's now a multiple? You can't do it verbally. You have to take it back and re-counter it to make it a multiple, right? Here's another thing that happens. Imagine you get an offer, $200,000, you counter it at $210,000. Just one counter, you just send it to, you're saying to the buyer's agent, you get your buyer to sign, accept the $210,000, send it back to me. As soon as I get it, we got a deal. Did you hear what I said? As soon as I get it. It's not a deal when they sign it. It's a deal when they deliver it to you. Okay, so you sent that out there. You're waiting for a response. While you're waiting, you get a brand new offer for $230,000. So you countered at $210,000, new offer $230,000. You have to immediately call your seller. Say, we just got an offer for $230,000. What do you want to do? Seller says, let's go with that one. Can you accept that one even though there's already an existing counter out there? Yes. Here's the problem, though. So how do you accept the new one? Well, you give it to your seller signs it, right? Not a deal yet. You got to send it back to that agent. And they have to receive it. They have to open the email. So you send it, and then 10 seconds later, agent number 1 returns to you the signed acceptance of your $210,000 counteroffer. Who bought it? Well, the question is, did agent number 2 open their email from you before you opened your email from agent number 1? And that's going to be a big problem. So here's how you avoid that problem. You don't open your emails. Yeah, right? Turn off your computer. Yes. What I was getting at actually was, if you're in that situation, you got to rescind the counter you've already sent before you accept the new one. How do you do that? We have a form for that. It's called withdrawal of offer, WOO. Or you just email them or call them up and say, you know that counter we gave you that you haven't responded to yet? Consider it revoked. Then you can feel free to accept the new one. So some people think when you make an offer, a counter offer, it's good till 5 o'clock on the 3rd day. It is, but you can cancel it before that. At 5 o'clock on the 3rd day, or you can change it obviously, at 5 o'clock on the 3rd day, it dies all by itself. But up until 5 o'clock 5 minutes after you write an offer, you can pull it back. Or a counter. Okay? But if you don't pull it back, and they send it to you, and you get the email, what if they send you an email, you see it on your computer, you see who it is, you know what it is, but you don't open it?
That's a problem.
The courts aren't clear on that one yet.
No way to prove you saw it.
It's hard to prove that you saw it.
That's right.
Believe it or not, the courts have not caught up to these email issues. So I'm just saying, I don't want any of you to be the test case, the famous test case on any of these things. So rescind those offers before you accept the new one.
The computers also have a request that they received it.
That's the best thing. You send it return receipt requested, and then it's pretty hard for them to deny that they opened it. But some agents will really be savvy about this, and they will turn off their computer and their smartphone and go hide. They're in some motel somewhere under an assumed name. And I'm not kidding around. If you can't find that agent, you can't accept. I know what you're saying. Well, I'll just deliver it to Coldwell Banker. Okay, what do you guys write when you write offers and counteroffers? Do you put Coldwell Banker or do you put your name? If you put your name, you're saying to the other side, you got to find me.
Yeah.
Finding my manager or somebody else at Coldwell Banker is not good enough. You have to track me down. You have to prove that I opened my email, or you hand delivered it to me in person. If you really don't trust the other agent, you get in your car, you bring a witness and a film crew, and you track them down and you give it to them on film. And then you hire a process server to deliver it, who will swear to God that they delivered it. It sounds crazy, but this is issues that can come up when you have multiple offers floating back and forth. I mean, you got to remember what makes a contract a contract. It's not the signature, it's the delivery and the receipt by the person whose name is indicated.
I asked the agent one day, because there were 3 offers, and I go, which is the highest? And he's all, well, I can't tell you that.
Well, in other words, you were asking the listing agent. He told you he had 3 offers.
Right.
And you asked him, what's the highest? And he wouldn't tell you.
He said, I can't tell you.
He's allowed to tell you. He just didn't want to tell you.
Right.
But he is allowed to. So don't take the argument, I can't tell you that. They can. In other words, let's put yourself as a listing agent. You get 4 offers. You can tell anybody anything. Some agent calls, yep, I got 4 offers. I'll tell you exactly who they're from and how much they are. As a listing agent, an offer is not confidential once you get it. Unless the buyer's agent submits before the offer this confidentiality form that says, I'm about to give you an offer. By signing this, you promise not to tell anyone about it. But if they don't sign the confidentiality form, the listing agent, they don't have to tell you. They may think it's in their seller's best interest to be sort of mysterious. How much is your other offer? Oh, it's really good. How good is it? It's really good. What if you ask them how many offers they got and they say 4? Can you demand proof of that? Well, you can't just by asking them, but if you think they're lying, you can sue them. And as part of discovery, they will have to provide them. Of course, then they'll just make them up themselves and get their friends. Who knows? I'm just saying that question comes up too sometimes. All right? Yeah. Shh.
You had mentioned a minute ago that, and this happens a lot, where somebody issues out a bunch of different counter offers, and they forget to check the multiple counter box. Okay, and then all these offers start rolling back in, and everybody's panicked because they think they've executed 4 to 5 contracts, and this house has been sold 5 times.
Good question. The answer is they've only sold it once, but it's to the first one back. And there may be an issue about proving who was the first one back. But they're not in trouble. They haven't sold it 5 times. Yeah.
Then given that being the situation, let's say that Patricia has a sale that she put into escrow or whatever. It looks like it's going to fall out, so she puts the property back in available. Another offer comes in, the seller signs and executes it with forgetting the fact that they forgot to put that it's prior to cancellation of the previous escrow. What does that second person who got that contract signed, and then all of a sudden the first escrow comes back and says, just kidding, I'm staying in.
Right.
Okay, so what's the protocol there?
I mean, other than avoiding that in the first place, obviously. If you're in that situation...
This seems to be a situation that happens a lot.
Yeah. Each of those buyers has a lawsuit.
Okay.
Because the first one says, you never canceled this contract. And the second one says, you never made it contingent on canceling some other contract. Obviously, the seller's only going to sell to one of them. You sort of figure out which one's the least likely to sue you. and pay them off.
So
You
it's
know?
different than the prior question.
Yeah, it's completely different.
So even though this one was signed first, the other four have no stake to that property.
Right. In other words, it sounds like it should be the same. Where, for some reason you send out 3 counter offers and they all come back. What I got through saying is the first one back buys it. Well, don't the other 2 have a claim? They may have a claim about being misled or something like that. But they don't have a claim they can force you to sue. They can sue you to enforce the contract because there's already an executed contract. It doesn't seem to be that should be different, but I'm just saying in my experience, the court seems to treat that differently than the outright. Either way, it's a problem. Either way, you're going to have unhappy people threatening to sue you, and they may sue you for misrepresentation or lack of good faith. It's a problem either way you do it. So obviously, you try to avoid those situations.
But how could they even perfect the suit? There's no care and control over the first buyer. It's not in the agent's control. They backed out. So it's kind of like being married.
I'm not saying the agent's going to get. I see what you're saying. I wasn't necessarily saying the agent was going to get sued. I was saying the principal was going to get sued. But they're going to blame their agent for letting them get in the situation. So that they're going to countersue you for breach of fiduciary duty, for screwing things up. Speaking of screwing things up, every speech I've ever given, I say this, and those of you that heard me before, I've heard me say this, but realtors seem not to know about the law that says, especially in this market, it's relevant, when you have an investor buyer buying a house that's in foreclosure that the seller is currently living in, you have to use a special purchase contract. A lot of you are nodding your heads, that's good. Investor buyer, house in foreclosure, owner occupied. If you're in that scenario and the investor uses the wrong form, it's actually a criminal felony, punishable by a $20,000 fine. And I have seen investors be held liable to pay $20,000 because they bought a house from someone in foreclosure without using the right form. Why do you care? Because if the investor is using a realtor, they can legitimately expect that the realtor knows what form to use. And the realtor will end up paying the $20,000 fine. Sometimes.
Which form is this?
It's NODPA, Notice of Default Purchase Agreement. Now, I gave this speech a couple months ago, and one of the people